Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name's Guthrie. I'm here with Susan. Hey, Susan.
Hello. I'm trying
So
not to laugh.
good. I just want everyone to know
I'm
I've
failing.
I've changed my DNS servers.
Oh, we
Okay,
really care about this.
I know this is the ongoing saga that everyone cares about. My connection on Restream says 10 out of 10.
Uh-huh.
10 out of 10, and your connection says 10 out of 10. So we
Yeah.
can't do any better than 10 out of 10.
So
We'll
you
give it a
think
try.
whatever you did with your DNS, whatever's
Oh, I'm not
is
going to
gonna
tempt
help your
fate
but you were hoping it
by
would help your connection because you've had connection problems.
all I'm going to say is Restream
Uh-huh.
says my connection is 10
All right.
out of 10.
Well, I'll let you know
You
if you
can't
start getting wonky.
you can't get any higher than that unless you're
Guthrie,
in
you're
Smile.
10.
Thank you. So today this is a good transition.
Uh-huh.
10 out of 10
Uh-huh.
is what we in the business call a metric.
Ta-da!
And we are talking today about metrics. This will probably be a shorter because maybe we'll do two parts. And it's just too long to go on and
You
on
always love
on
those
about
2
metrics.
parts or 3 parts or 4
Yeah,
parts or
but
5
does
parts.
anyone really have the stamina to go 10 rounds with metrics?
I don't.
Yeah, so there you go. So one of the big topics that we want to cover is I just want to talk about metrics in UX. So, and this is why it might be two parts. I want to start out with because there's like internal metrics, right? Like how do you measure UX success, that kind of stuff. We've done some of that before. ROI of UX. There's a workshop that we're going to be teaching next week.
Yeah, for one of our
Yeah, it
clients.
is. It's not a public workshop, but
No,
it's called UX success metrics.
which is really hard to say fast 5
US
times. Yeah,
success
see?
metrics. Yeah.
You can't, yeah.
And so that's it's all about. Can you describe it in a sentence or two? That workshop.
Why you should have them, what they are, and how to create them.
That's pretty good. You've just used the word and the definition of the word, so that's
I didn't, I just said them.
okay. What is UX success metrics?
UX success metrics
Are
are when you set how you are going to evaluate the impact of the UX work you are doing.
That's a great sentence.
Did I do
You
okay?
get 10 out of 10 for that.
I
That
don't
was
think we
really good.
have that sentence in the workshop. I
You
think we
should
better
probably add that. Yeah,
wait a minute. I gotta write it
write
down.
that
Hold
down.
on,
Write that
hold
down.
on.
Yeah.
I got it. All right. What did I
No,
say?
I have no idea. Timestamp. Timestamp.
All right, we'll go back and listen.
No, I remember. It was
What did I say?
UX metrics are when basically you figure out how to evaluate the I don't know, did you say performance of the UX team? Is that what
Impact.
impact? Yes.
How to evaluate the impact of your UX work. There you go. Okay. Very good. I wrote it
So
down.
that's one way to do UX measuring. We talked about ROI of UX. That's sort of like
Return on investment.
return on investment, right? Like how
how
can
do you
we
decide if
literally
it
translate UX into dollars and cents?
right? How can you decide if it's worth it to do the UX work that you're planning on doing?
And then there's another way you can talk about metrics, which is
Yes.
a user-facing perspective. Okay, so and that's the one I want to talk about today.
Which is what? What do you mean?
When you are displaying information to
Yes.
users,
Yes.
when you are displaying metrics to
Oh,
users,
that's totally different. That's what
it
you wanna
is.
talk about? Oh, this is great. So I come on thinking we're talking about X, and it
We
turns out we're not talking about X, we're talking
we've
about
done ROI of
Y.
UX. We'll do it again, but we've done that before. We've talked about measuring UX stuff before.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking
Well,
about
this
then?
is part one. This is part one.
All right, what are we talking about in part 1 then? Because it's not what I thought.
Displaying metrics to users.
Displaying metrics information. You mean like you have a metrics dashboard or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. When you want to display measurements of things to users who supposedly care about the measurements.
Yes. And I only bring it up because um, in some capacity, who's the user? And maybe the user is the stakeholder who's in charge of running the
All
UX.
right, all right, so
No, I
give us
kid. I kid.
give us an example of what you mean by give us an example.
Well, there is I only bring it up because I wanted to focus in on that 10 out of 10 metric.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it actually touches on so many interesting UX facets and aspects.
Okay.
The first thing is we have the literal way that it's displayed, which in this case is just very simple. There are 4 bars, 1 to 4, and it's, green if it's high, and it's orange if it's medium, and it's yellow, and then it gets red if it's
Well,
bad.
if there's 4 bars, how do you get the number 10?
Uh, that's a good question. I think it's sort of like 1 through 3 is bar 1, 4 through.
But do they say that?
No. If
Okay.
you just shows the bars, it looks like a cell phone signal, where they kind of slope up.
Yeah, and then it says
And
somewhere
if you
10 out of
hover
10.
over, it says network connection, blank out of 10. So, okay, so that's like, so there's the UI of it, like literally displaying that information
Yes.
graphically. There's the per whatever disclosure. By if I want more information, I can hover over the graphic,
Yeah.
and it discloses even more
Data. Okay.
data to it, right? If I'm curious, I can't click on it, right? That would be the next step. If
Yeah.
I, click on it, it would open up some sort of tab with advanced,
Yeah.
trace routes. And by the way, today I actually did run the IP config and the trace route to the Restream servers to see if I had DNS issues. So I'm trying, everyone. I really am. So there's those aspects of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the most user facing. And then
Yeah.
you take a step back, okay?
Yeah.
Right? You have the, I don't know if you want to call it the information architecture, the what do you're the expert here. What do you call it when you take a bunch of stuff and give it a label? Like network connection, right? Like that's like a whole universe of things. Within it has all sorts of data, right? And we're going
Yeah.
to summarize that to the user as network connection.
Yeah.
What's that term called when you give something a label?
Well, it depends on how you're talking about it, but you could talk about grouping. I probably would talk about it as a container.
A container.
Mhm.
That's what you would call it.
Yeah. So to me, this is, it's all part of the conceptual model. Is how are you grouping things? How are you organizing them? What goes inside of something else? What is a container and what's an item in the container? And these are all, it can often be called information architecture. So I would,
Okay.
yeah, any of that. Yep.
Okay. So yeah. So whether you're perhaps talking about the information architecture of something, or perhaps you're talking about the container of it, we need to present that to the user.
Yes.
There is not, I'm sure, on the Restream side of things,
Yeah.
it's like network connection. There's not like a you type. I'm trying to explain it. Network connection is not an official standardized unit of measure developed by the International Association of,
Yeah, I
whatever,
understand.
right?
Right, right.
Like it is an amalgamation of much more technical measurements,
That
you
may or
know,
may not be standard. So Restream
ping, packet
Restream might
loss
think of network connection is a collection of these things, and somebody, Zoom might say network connection is a
is a
collection
connection
of
of these things.
these things. Yeah.
Netflix would say it's different too, right?
Right,
Restream does a
right,
lot of upload and download. There's all sorts of ways, if you're playing a video game, right? You're
right.
looking more at ping. There's all
So
sorts of different things. And so the process of determining how to display information, how to just how even what, like, it's because that's why it touches on so many things, right? Like it's like, okay, so you have to, how are you displaying information to a user in a way that the user can
what
understand
information are you going to display?
what
What
information, and then how are you, like you said,
How are
putting it
you
in a
rolling it up?
container.
Are you rolling it
It's
up? How much are you rolling it up? What's in there? All of those
Yes, do you let
decisions.
the user dig deeper?
Yeah, and these are all important decisions, and they all have to do. Um, okay, so sometimes people refer to this, Guthrie, as information visualization.
Hmm.
So there's a whole field unto itself of how to visually display information. But obviously all these things are connected, right? There's the decisions you're making about what is part of the metric or measurement. There's the decision you're making on how many levels to have. There's another decision about how many levels to show people. So do we roll it all up, or do we not roll it all up? Do we let them drill into a lot of detail, or do we not? And then, as you said, there's the user interface decisions of how you show it and how people can
Yeah.
interact with it. And then, I would say there's another kind of whole level, which is the visual presentation. So I can say to you, oh, yeah, we're going to build in the UI, we're going to have a graph, and we're going to let people hover and more information will appear. And, that's the whole UI. But then, okay, what does the graph look like? What does the hover look like? What do those bars look like? I mean, that's a whole, visual design aspect of it. So there's a lot of pieces to show, possibly, to showing metrics to users.
My favorite one is, by the way,
What? What?
it's actually YouTube. So on any YouTube video, people may not know this. If you right click on the YouTube video,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
you will be able to say there's an option that says stats for nerds.
Wait a minute. When you mean when you right click on the video, you mean as you're watching the video, you right click just anywhere in the video in the
Yeah,
box?
yeah. Here, I'll share
You'll
my
show
screen.
me, but for people who are listening, we can't see your screen. But I will annotate. He's brought up a video about ramen noodles, which makes me
It's
hungry.
it's not. This
And
is the Broken Silicon podcast. Okay,
okay, and
all right,
so there's a video. Is the video
right.
playing?
No,
Does it have
this
to be playing to do this?
no.
Will it do it if it's playing?
Yes,
Okay. So you're just right in the middle of the where the video is
player.
playing. You are right clicking. And what does it say?
Stats for nerds.
All right. What happens if you press that? I had no idea this was there.
Yeah,
What do you see?
a little window pops up and
What's
it
in
tells
there?
me
It's very
video
small.
ID, the number of frames dropped, the current resolution, the volume normalized at negative 5 decibels, content, the codecs used, the color, I'm at BT 709, the
Okay.
connection speed, the network activity, the buffer health.
Can I
Uh,
ask a question?
there's a thing that says mystery text,
We don't know what that is. Can I ask a
and then
question?
there's the date. Yeah.
Why would I want to know that? Do you ever bring this up?
I have
Stats
in the
for nerds?
past
All right.
sometimes.
Why? What is the
Um,
use case here?
okay, so for example, there's a couple ways. I haven't done it recently, but for example, back in the day, let's say I uploaded a video,
Yeah.
and I knew the video I uploaded
Yeah.
was like
I
a
was going to
4K
say,
video
you know,
at like, we'll just say 60 frames per second. I can right click on this and say, oh, wait, this is only pumping out at, 1080p 30 frames per second. I thought it didn't look like 60, right? Or what codec is this using?
okay.
Oh,
All right.
interesting.
So for some
Or
nerds, that
maybe
might be useful.
if you're having connection troubles,
Yeah.
which hasn't happened to me, at least for YouTube. There was a time when YouTube was maybe less reliable, and sometimes you hit refresh one or two times. Maybe people remember
Yeah.
those
I
days.
remember that. Yeah.
And you could just, hey, okay, so I'm having drops. My buffer health is just not loading.
Yeah.
Maybe I can figure out
Okay.
something that's going on.
So why did you show
It's
us
not
this?
that useful, but mostly just to know what the. Okay, here's a version.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter. I was
Why?
gonna, yeah,
All right.
go ahead.
So why did you bring this up?
It's just one of the more interesting ways that I've seen showing metrics or letting regular people do metrics, to even call it stats for nerds.
Yeah.
There's so many connotations there, especially with Google, which is such a big company. And
Yeah.
it's been in there for forever.
Yeah.
I just find that kind of interesting.
Okay.
So this is why one of the things in metrics is so interesting, because it touches on so many aspects of UX.
Right. Because you have the information architecture, the conceptual model, the visual design, the UI, and I think it goes all the way back to who are the users and why would they want to know this, right? I think one of the tricky things about the design of metrics is that you often have different user types who want different information.
Yeah.
Um, and, they don't necessarily if want to have to wade through all your, yeah. So you've organized it for this persona, and then another persona is like, oh, really? I have to like go through that many clicks or that many hovers or drill down that much to get to it. But if you don't do it that way, then you've got the opposite problem where you're showing all this detail, and then you have the user who just wanted to know, you know, how many people viewed the video. So what I've seen, in fact, it's interesting because I was just sitting this week sitting in a meeting with a client, and they were discussing a metrics dashboard. So this is very relevant. And one of the things that typically happens is that the people who have the data, like the data scientists who have the access to all the data, one of two things happens. One is either they get very excited about all the data and they want you to see all the data, and so they're creating this dashboard, and I hate that term. We could talk about why I don't like the term dashboard, but they're creating a dashboard where they're showing all this data, and they get very excited about it, and the user who's using it doesn't want to see 2/3 of it or 3/4 of it, and wants most of it to just go away unless they ask for details. I sometimes get the feeling that you're hurting the feelings of the data expert, like and they just can't they have a hard time giving it up. It's like, yeah, but don't you want to see this? Don't you want to see that? It's like, no, it's not what I want to see.
So I'll give this restream as a perfect example.
Yeah.
On one hand, like, I just want, like, I don't need to know all the details of the data and the stream and the this and the that, right?
Yeah.
I just want you to tell me that my network connection is 10 out of 10 and that I don't have
Or
to
if
worry
it's
about it.
not. right?
or if it's not.
Or today, for some reason, it's 3 out of 10, and you got to worry about it.
Now, I had those audio stutter issues, by the way, and a thing did not pop up and say, "Oh my god, your stream is terrible."
Yeah.
It was giving me like 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, which you
Yeah.
would say is, "Oh, well, maybe it's a little problem. Maybe my
But it's
video
not
hitches every,"
bad.
but it's not bad. Versus, "Oh my god, like parts of this podcast are basically like it just you just and I just kind of stutter out." So, in that case, it would have been really useful because I am more of a pro user. It would have been really useful to be able to dive in.
And
Why
see
is my
what's
network
going
8 out of 10?
Well,
What
2
is
things.
causing that?
2
It would
things.
have helped me diagnose.
Yeah, but 2 things. You needed to know that 8 out of 10 was not good, because 8 out of 10 doesn't sound bad to me. So
Well, it
you
depends what
need
your application is, right? So
right.
on one hand, maybe it would have been okay if we're just like, I don't know, if I'm just like doing a,
I don't know why you
I don't know.
yeah, you
When
always
would audio cutting out be okay? I guess it's like never. I was trying to think
No,
like some sort of
you're not
meeting or
doing
something.
any audio. You're just doing video. I'm showing you how to put together the IKEA desk, and I'm not saying anything. I don't know. Yeah, no, I think so from a UX point of view, of course, then I'm going to say that if you're going to do effectric effective
Effectric measure trick.
effective metric display, you have to understand not just what the metrics are and not just, well, and what metrics are important to the users you're showing it to, and why. Why is it important? What do you expect? I think this is an interesting question that maybe isn't always thought about. Once you display this metrics, what do you think people are going to do with it? Like, I think there's almost this unspoken assumption that, well, they're just looking at them. They don't need to do anything. There's no decisions they need to make from it. We just want to show the data. So I think you got to sometimes dig deeper and find out why would you want to know that, and what would you do when you had that data.
Right.
That's important.
Right.
But I think a bigger question. Can I tell you what I think the bigger question is?
Mm-hmm.
It is not just about how to display it and all that, but why does anybody want it? Like, what's important in it? So if it's okay with you, can I go into that a little bit?
Yeah. Go right ahead.
Okay.
I will. I may. I'm gonna do something with my cat, and I'll be back in like
Yeah,
30
I hear your
seconds.
cat in the background.
Yeah.
So
So.
this is a time when the audio is quite good on Restream. And so
It's
we
too
get to
good.
hear
It's
the
too
cat.
good. We need
We
less.
need
Okay.
worse audio. Yeah, so
I'll
he's
be
going
right
to go
back in a
take
minute.
care of the cat. I think we've maybe mentioned before. Go ahead, Guthrie. I'll just talk. I think we've maybe mentioned before that Guthrie has cut. Well, I get Guthrie is broadcasting from his home in Chicago, and he has a cat there who is quite old. I don't know, 16, 17 years old, and just sometimes needs things and starts meowing about it. And so sometimes Guthrie has to take care of him. Anyway, I was going to say, um, I think, in any kind of metrics work, and this is true for this kind of metric we're talking about, as well as some of the other, UX success metrics we mentioned, and we'll probably come back to on another podcast and talk about in more detail. But anytime you're talking about metrics work, you have to stop and ask, what is the reason that we're collecting this, and what metrics are important to us, and what metrics are useful. And I am not a proponent of measuring things and then sharing the measurements with others, like stakeholders, unless you know why you're doing it, and what you're going to do with the information. In fact, I would say, the opposite of, instead of going to your data team, whoever they are, and saying, "Oh, what do you have? What kind of data do you have? What kind of measurements do you have?" I think you should always start from, what are the measurements that would be useful and important to us, and why is that? And then once we have figured that out, then we can go to the data science team or the quantitative people or whoever else has the data and say, okay, this is what we're trying to learn and understand and track. You know, we have some ideas about how we might do that. Is any of this data a reality? And then you can start to compromise. It's like, well, no, we don't track that currently. Could we? Nah, I don't think we could. Okay. What do you have that's close? Oh, well, we have this data. Does that help you out? Yes or no? So, um, I that's what I think is important. I think you should always start with, what is it you really want to know? Why do you want to know that? And in fact, mm, uh, and then translate that, into, how would we measure that? So if I want to know, I'll use just a I'll just use an example. I want to know if less people are calling into the customer support for help with the new version of our product. Okay, fine. Why do you want to know that? So I want to know that because I'm trying to find out if we've improved the user experience of the product. And so one way to measure that would be, are there less calls? And then you can dig into that. What does that mean? Are there less calls? Are you talking about, less customers calling in, or are you talking about literally less calls, regardless if it's from one customer or multiple customers? I mean, that's when you can kind of really dig into, um, how would you measure that. And then once you've got that all set, then you can say, okay, do we have access to the data that would answer these questions or not? So that's the route I would take. I think sometimes people tend to do the opposite, which is, oh, let's figure out metrics. Okay, what do we have? What kind of metrics are currently being tracked? Um, that's probably not the way I'd want to start, but
Well, I mean, this is why I think it's sort of the perfect. I don't want to say the perfect, like the perfect storm. But I think this is one of the reasons that there are so many really bad implementations of displaying metrics to users,
is because,
because there's so many touch points on, so you need so many different, you need if you're just doing a button, right? What color should the button be? You can silo that.
well, hey, I've been in
Sorry.
I've
In
been
theory,
I've been in meetings where there were 10 people in the room, and for an hour we argued either the color of the button or what it should say or where it should be on the screen. Maybe an hour for each of those. So you can, yeah. But I get what you're saying. In this case, there's even more factors. It's not just the color of the button, but there's all those container factors and on and on and on. Yeah. So
yeah.
you
So,
think this is why we see so
but then,
many
right? So, like, yeah. So when
bad
it comes to metrics, not only do you have to have the UI team
yeah,
understand the user
and the
and
visual
what
team.
should it be called, right? Network connection, and the visual team to actually display the information connect, and the dev team to make sure you have the information available and it's getting fed,
Yeah, correctly. Yep.
into the app
Yep.
correctly. And so, like, there are so many places where it can just not fall apart or not go really well, you
Yeah.
know. And I think like this restream one is probably exactly that. Like what are the levels of each bar, right?
Yeah.
1 out of 10, 1 to 10, right? And it was probably set by the metric is probably determined by some sort of, if I had to guess, by the dev team who's looking at overall packet loss as a percentage of
So do you
whatever.
think the likelihood that anyone from Restream listens to our podcast is probably really low, right?
That's correct.
But Restream, if you are out there listening, we want
No,
to hear
I
from
don't
you.
know. Hey, look, I had one interaction this one time. I'm not saying it's just a guess.
Yeah.
So just my guess is that, the how they determine the 1 to 10 is a sort of a measure as a percentage of whatever underlying metrics they're using to determine network connection, like packet loss or packet, pings over
Yeah.
100 milliseconds or something. And so it's sort of it is it is the metric by which you can determine if the connection will drop, and that is what network
Yeah.
connection out of 10 really means.
Yeah.
But to someone who's talking,
Broadcasting. Yeah.
right, we need 99% uptime,
Right.
and at 98% uptime we'll have a little bit of a problem. At 90% uptime, where we're having, every 10 seconds we lose a second,
Yeah.
that's
That's not
basically
that won't
catastrophic,
work. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it's all a matter of, like where those lines are cut to determine the quality of the network, to who. And I think that's why it's so hard,
Yeah. Okay.
because
So here's
that
another,
had to be coded in by someone with the UX team, had to have the user in mind when they set the
and you don't
benchmarks
think
for
they
where to
did.
drive.
All right. And here I'll make a plug
I'm wrong.
for why it's so important. If you're doing this, you got to test it out. Like you have to do user testing. So I was just reminded, Guthrie, we had a client years ago who shall remain nameless, um, who, I don't know if you remember this, we actually were user testing a metrics dashboard. You may not remember this.
Hmm.
And there had been this big discussion, talk about colors, about the colors for the different categories. If it was this, that would be green. And if it was this, it would be red. And then there was the color, I'm doing air quotes here, yellow. Do you remember this? Because a major stakeholder said, "Oh, when it hits that, we're going to make it gold colored." And we said, "Well, wait a minute. Gold looks a lot like yellow.
I
And
remember
if
this
you're
now.
doing, green to red, yellow is in the middle, right? Green is great, yellow is not so great, and red is really bad." And he was like, "No, no, it's not yellow, it's gold, and it goes on top. It's better than green." Do you remember that? And
Yeah.
so we said, "Fine, fine, fine. We'll do it your way, and then we'll test it." And of course, as my memory, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, is that basically people thought yellow was not as good as green, and they didn't understand why it was on top. So
Well, but also, I think, and now you're getting into displaying.
yeah,
God, it's so complicated. Displaying aspects of quality in a visual way.
right,
What is gold? Gold is not just a color,
yeah.
but also how reflective or shiny that surface
Oh,
is,
okay.
right?
You're
Is it
getting
matte
no,
versus?
no, no.
Well, no,
Okay.
because
Well,
that's what
no,
make.
you're
If
right.
you've ever
You're right.
seen actual gold, what makes it look, special,
Gold,
gold is not its color,
but it's reflectiveness.
but well, the way and the way it shines, right?
Right,
It's the
right.
shimmeriness of it, right? So to have simply a gold color,
We may not do it
yeah,
if it's a
yeah. So
matte
it's just,
gold.
so we're just, it is the perfect metrics are the perfect confluence of like every single thing of UX. And I think,
I never realized it was that important.
well, I'm not saying it's important. I'm just saying it's hard.
Yeah.
Probably there are probably things that are more important on a website than a metric. But I'm just, but like if you want to, maybe if you and your team want to try like a challenging project, to sort
Yeah.
of like learn and grow and get better and figure out where like the holes in the boat. So in some like a stress test, right?
Yeah.
Like they do, like when you're designing an automobile, right? Just like, okay, well, let's put it on
Oh,
they have the crazy bumpy road
yeah,
just to see
yeah.
how it handles.
Okay,
Um,
so yeah, go ahead, finish your thought, and then I'm gonna.
well, your UX team
Yeah,
should figure out like metrics that you need to display to your users,
and how would you
and
display
and
them?
how would you actually do it, and how, but you have to like actually like talk to the engineering team and figure, like you'd have, or maybe pretend to talk to the engineering team. You need some way to like accept the bottlenecks that you'd have because it
Okay,
requires
but you
other
just
teams
made
to
me
have
think of two things. One might be
be
good,
fun.
one might be bad. I could imagine, I teach a course every semester, right? I could imagine that at University of Wisconsin, I could imagine that a fun assignment might be to show some kind of metric, and then have the students, they have to say whether it's well designed or not on all these levels,
Yeah.
and then they have to redesign it. But what the first thing I thought of, that was the second thing I thought of, and I'll probably write it down and use it in one of my classes. But the first thing I thought of was, this sounds like a really, all right, so there's the whole, this is a totally different topic that we could talk about. I won't go off on it, but you know how these days everybody's trying to find new hires, and they make them do tests, which which I'll just say I'm not a fan of. But in through the hiring process, they give you a design challenge and you have to solve it. Do you think, I'm sure somebody's using this design challenge, but it would be a good one though, wouldn't it? Except I'm not for design challenges while hiring. But I could just imagine that someone would take this idea and say, "Hey, let's do this as a design challenge." Right? Here's a
Right.
here's a metrics, because it gets into so many elements, right? You could see, does the person ask what's the important information, who's the user, and the interactions and the visual design. It would kind of get into every aspect of UX and UI. So it would be kind of a good test, but don't use it because you shouldn't be testing your applicants. But that is another topic that I'm sure is controversial, and we would get people that wouldn't agree. And maybe we could write that down as a possible topic for a future podcast episode. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay. Guthrie, anything else you wanted to say about this topic?
No, I don't think we solved it or we really helped people at all. We just basically said that metrics are hard and that there's a
And
lot
tough
that
luck.
actually
Yeah.
goes it seems like something so simple. Network connection 10 out of 10, but
And
to
it's
get there is actually, there are like all these layers of the onion, and I just thought that was interesting. So,
That's often true for user experience work. Guthrie, before we end, can we give some updates? There's so much stuff coming up soon. There's just so much stuff. Um,
yeah, we won't be on next week.
we won't be on next week. That's one thing I wanted to say, because we're going on our first trip.
We might not be on for 2 or 3 weeks.
Why?
This might be an extended
That's
hiatus.
terrible.
It's not that
Really?
terrible. We're traveling. There's good reasons. It's not like it's yeah.
Unless, well, you're traveling more than I am. I could get on and do a bunch of
Sure.
podcasts that you
Yeah.
don't even know about.
Could you go,
No, I
yeah, go solo. So next week,
I could do a
traveling.
podcast on the pros and cons of having your son be your business partner, and
the
he's
week
not there
after
to defend himself.
traveling. The week
Okay.
after that, I'm traveling.
Oh no.
The week after that, I'm not traveling.
So which week do
And
you
the week
think
after,
will?
I'm traveling.
All right.
And the
Well,
week,
so
yeah.
if you guys don't see us for a couple of weeks, it's because we're traveling. Anyway, but that's not all I wanted to say. I also wanted to say things that people might want to check out. In a couple of weeks, for those of you who are listening live, we're doing a, a session for IXDF that is on the top 10 things you need to know about people. I'm doing a talk at the virtually at the BAD conference, BAD, Behavioral Action Design, I think that stands for, which is based out of London, but I'm doing it virtually. That's coming up. You may want to check that out. Is there anything else? We're doing all kinds of things, but I'm trying to remember if anything else we're doing is open to the public. I think that might be it. Are
No,
you?
just,
No, you're
again,
doing something, aren't you?
yeah, I'm doing the design. I'm going to speak at the Design Apps Conference. That's just an online session. You can keep an eye out for that.
Okay.
And also, if you're in Europe and you're looking for get work for us in November and October,
October,
get in touch.
November. Yeah, we
with
are.
me.
We are planning some trips.
Assuming there is not significant geopolitical
Always
slash
assuming that,
pandemic health crises that,
which
yeah.
is always, yeah, always that. Yep. All right, Guthrie. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if people want to get hold of us, they do that by what?
You can email info@thetmw.com.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.